I found out my wife planned to divorce me, so I moved my assets. 1 week later, she filed for divorce, expecting millions, then panicked when her plan completely backfired. My name is Michael Davis. I'm 49 years old, and for the past 22 years, I've owned Davis Construction, one of Chicago's most successful mid-size building companies. We've built everything from luxury condos in Lincoln Park to commercial developments in the Loop, generating steady seven-figure annual revenues. I understand concrete, steel, and schedules. But more importantly, I understand that the strongest structures are built on solid foundations that can't be seen from the surface. Standing in my home office, reading my wife's text messages about finally getting what I deserve from this marriage, I realized that the most important foundation I'd ever built was the one protecting my assets from exactly this scenario. I met Lisa Hartwell 3 years ago at a charity auction for the Chicago Children's Hospital. She was 26 then, a former runway model transitioning into what she called lifestyle content creation. With 2.3 million Instagram followers, she'd built a brand around luxury fashion, fine dining, and aspirational living. Her feed was a carefully curated collection of designer outfits, high-end restaurants, and exotic travel destinations. She was stunning in the way that stops conversations. 5'8", blonde hair that caught light like spun gold, and the kind of effortless elegance that made expensive clothes look even more expensive. When she approached me during the cocktail hour, I assumed she was networking for potential collaboration opportunities. "You're Michael Davis," she said, extending a perfectly manicured hand. "I've heard about your work. The Tribune featured your Lincoln Park project last month. Very impressive." She'd done her homework. The article had mentioned my company's growth and estimated revenue, painting me as one of Chicago's rising construction entrepreneurs. What it hadn't mentioned was the complex financial structure I'd built to protect those revenues. Our courtship was swift and public. Lisa documented everything on Instagram: candlelit dinners at Alinea, weekend trips to Napa Valley, shopping excursions to Michigan Avenue. Her followers loved the self-made businessman and his beautiful girlfriend narrative. The engagement photos alone generated 400,000 likes. I played my part perfectly, taking her to the kinds of places her audience expected to see. The Lamborghini Huracan I leased specifically for our relationship photographed beautifully against Chicago's skyline. The penthouse apartment I rented in Gold Coast provided the perfect backdrop for her lifestyle content. Every experience was documented, hashtagged, and monetized. The wedding was Lisa's masterpiece, a $150,000 production at the Chicago Botanic Garden that she live-streamed to her followers while selling sponsorship placements to luxury vendors. I wrote the checks cheerfully, understanding them as business expenses for maintaining the illusion I'd carefully constructed. Because that's what it was, an illusion. The man Lisa fell in love with was a character I'd created specifically for women like her. The real Michael Davis was significantly more cautious with money, lived in a modest house in Oak Park, and drove a 5-year-old Ford F-150. But Lisa had never seen that version of me. She'd married my Instagram persona, not my actual life. The first 2 years of marriage were Lisa's golden era of content creation. Her follower count grew to 2.8 million as she documented the life of a construction CEO's wife. Designer handbag hauls, luxury vacation vlogs, and day-in-my-life content featuring our supposedly lavish lifestyle generated steady sponsorship revenue. She was good at what she did. I had to give her that. The production quality was professional, her engagement rates were impressive, and brands paid premium rates for access to her affluent, aspirational audience. She'd turned being my wife into a full-time career. But maintaining the illusion was expensive. The penthouse lease was $8,000 monthly. The Lamborghini cost $2,400. Designer clothes, jewelry, and accessories for her content easily ran $15,000 per month. First-class travel, 5-star accommodations, and Michelin-starred restaurants added another $20,000 quarterly. I funded all of it through Davis Construction's marketing budget, justifying the expenses as brand building and client entertainment. My accountant, Robert Chen, raised eyebrows, but didn't ask questions when I requested detailed documentation of every expenditure. Mike, he said during one of our quarterly reviews, you're spending more on lifestyle marketing than some companies spend on actual construction equipment. Image matters in this business, Robert. Clients want to hire someone who looks successful. He nodded, but I could see his skepticism. Robert had known me for 15 years, had watched me build the company from a 3-man crew to 60 employees. He remembered when my biggest luxury was upgrading from McDonald's to Subway for job site lunches. What Robert didn't understand was that every expensive dinner, every luxury purchase, every first-class ticket was an investment in protecting my actual assets. Because the more convinced Lisa became of my wealth, the less likely she was to look deeper into my financial structure. And that structure was bulletproof. 22 years earlier, when I started Davis Construction with $50,000 borrowed against my parents' house, I'd met with Harrison Blackwood, an estate planning attorney who specialized in asset protection for entrepreneurs. Harrison was old-school Chicago law. 3 generations of Blackwoods had represented business owners who understood that wealth needed to be protected from lawsuits, creditors, and ex-wives. Michael, Harrison had said during our first meeting, you're thinking about building a company. I want you to think about building a fortress. We'd spent 3 months constructing the legal architecture that would protect my assets, regardless of what happened in my personal life. Davis Construction was owned by a Nevada LLC, which was owned by a Delaware holding company, which was controlled by a Cook Islands trust established before I was even married to my first wife. My personal residence, investment accounts, and liquid assets were held by separate legal entities, each with different ownership structures and jurisdictions. On paper, Michael Davis, the individual, owned almost nothing. Michael Davis, the beneficiary of various trusts and entities, controlled everything. The system was complex, expensive, and absolutely legal. More importantly, it was invisible to anyone who didn't know exactly what to look for. Lisa had signed a prenuptial agreement before our wedding, but the document she'd reviewed covered only the assets she could see: the penthouse, the cars, the visible trappings of wealth. What she didn't know was that those assets represented less than 5% of my actual net worth. The construction company she believed was worth $8 million, based on public records and industry estimates, legally owned by entities she'd never heard of, established years before we met. The investment portfolio she assumed must exist to support our lifestyle, held by offshore trusts that didn't appear on any documents she'd seen. The real estate holdings she occasionally heard me discuss on business calls, owned by LLCs registered in states she'd never visited. I'd built my life the same way I built my buildings, with a strong foundation invisible from the surface, designed to withstand any storm. The discovery came by accident, the way these things usually do. I was working late in my home office on a Tuesday evening in October, reviewing bids for a downtown hotel renovation, when Lisa burst through the door without knocking. "Michael, I need your credit card, the one with no limit. I'm doing a collaboration with Cartier tomorrow." And she stopped mid-sentence, staring at my computer screen, which displayed financial documents I'd been reviewing for our quarterly trust administration. "What is that?" she asked, her influencer bright voice suddenly curious. I minimized the window casually. "Just some business paperwork, boring stuff. What were you saying about Cartier?" But I could see her mind working. Lisa wasn't stupid. She'd successfully monetized her beauty and built a substantial social media business. She understood numbers, even if she didn't understand legal structures. "Those numbers looked really big," she pressed. "Like bigger than what you usually show me for the company." "Different type of report," I said, handing her the credit card she'd requested. "Sometimes the accounting software formats things strangely." She took the card but lingered in the doorway, studying my face with the kind of attention she usually reserved for finding the perfect lighting for her photos. 2 weeks later, I came home early from a job site to find Lisa in my office, sitting at my desk with my laptop open. The password wasn't that hard to figure out, she said without looking up. Your mother's maiden name and the year you started the company. I stood in the doorway, calculating. The laptop contained basic financial information, bank statements for the accounts she knew about, tax returns that showed only what I wanted them to show. Nothing that would reveal the actual structure of my holdings. Find anything interesting? I asked. You have way more money than you've been telling me, she said, turning the screen toward me. This bank account alone has almost $400,000 in it. I walked over and looked at the statements she'd discovered. It was one of my operational accounts, used for business expenses and the lifestyle costs of maintaining our marriage. To Lisa, $400,000 probably seemed like a fortune. In reality, it was petty cash. Lisa, those are business accounts. The money flows in and out constantly for payroll, materials, equipment. It's not like having $400,000 to spend. But if it's there now, and there's more coming in, she was scrolling through months of deposits and withdrawals, her content creator mind already calculating possibilities. What are you thinking? I asked, though I was beginning to understand exactly what she was thinking. I'm thinking that maybe we should talk about getting a bigger place. Maybe something on Lakeshore Drive. My followers would love content from a real luxury penthouse, not just a rental. The place we have is fine. Michael. She closed the laptop and looked at me directly. I've been tracking our expenses for my tax preparation. You're spending almost $50,000 a month on our lifestyle, and that's not even pushing it. If you can afford that consistently, you can afford to buy instead of rent. She wasn't wrong about the spending, but what she didn't understand was that every dollar I spent on our visible lifestyle was designed to prevent her from looking for the invisible assets. Let me think about it, I said. That night, I called Harrison Blackwood. She's starting to ask questions, I told him. About the structures? About money in general. She found some bank statements, is pressuring me to upgrade our living situation. Harrison was quiet for a moment. Michael, in my experience, once a spouse starts actively investigating finances, they're usually preparing for something. You might want to consider activation protocols. Activation protocols. We'd established them years ago but never used them. Procedures for quickly moving assets and restructuring ownership if I detected threats to the existing arrangement. How quickly can we implement? For full protection? 5 business days, but Michael, once we activate, there's no going back. The assets become completely untouchable, but the process leaves digital fingerprints. If she's planning legal action, her attorneys will eventually figure out what happened. And by then it won't matter. Everything will be locked down. I made the decision that night. Whatever Lisa was planning, I wouldn't be caught unprepared. The activation took exactly 5 days, just as Harrison had promised. On Monday, we restructured the Nevada LLC to transfer operational control to the Delaware Holding Company. On Tuesday, the Delaware entity distributed assets to the Cook Islands Trust, triggering prearranged provisions that moved everything beyond U.S. legal jurisdiction. Wednesday involved updating beneficiary designations and trust documents. Thursday was for new banking relationships and account transfers. Friday, we finalized documentation and destroyed the old paper trail. By the following Monday, Michael Davis, the individual, owned a 2015 Ford F-150, basic household furniture, and approximately $15,000 in checking accounts. Every significant asset was now controlled by legal entities that existed beyond the reach of Illinois divorce courts. Lisa noticed nothing during this process. She was busy with a sponsored campaign for a luxury skincare brand, spending her days creating content about self-care Sunday routines and getting that glow from within. Her Instagram stories documented yoga sessions, green smoothies, and product placements with practiced precision. On Wednesday evening, she suggested we go to Gibson's for dinner. I want to celebrate, she said, applying lipstick with the kind of precision she brought to everything visual. Celebrate what? Just us. Our life? I've been thinking about what you said, about the money and everything. I want you to know I appreciate how hard you work for all this. We drove to the restaurant in the Lamborghini, Lisa filming herself in the passenger seat for her date night content series. At dinner, she ordered the most expensive items on the menu and documented each course for her followers, narrating our evening like a lifestyle tutorial. Michael spoils me so much, she told her phone camera, panning to show me across the table. 3 years of marriage, and he still makes me feel like the luckiest girl in the world. I smiled for the camera, playing my part in her performance. But I noticed she was checking her phone more frequently than usual, responding to texts with unusual urgency. Everything okay? I asked when she excused herself for the third time to take a call. Just some collaboration opportunities. You know how it is. Brands don't keep business hours. After dinner, as we waited for valet parking, Lisa received another call. This time, I overheard part of the conversation. Thursday is perfect, she was saying. Yes, I'll have everything ready by then. Thursday. I made a mental note. Thursday afternoon, Lisa announced she was going to a spa day with her friend Jessica. Girls' day, she said, kissing my cheek. Don't wait up, we're doing the full package. She left at noon, carrying an oversized designer bag and wearing the kind of outfit that suggested she was going somewhere more formal than a spa. After she left, I walked through our penthouse, noting details I'd never paid attention to before. Lisa's home office, which she used for content planning and brand communications, had been thoroughly cleaned. Her usually chaotic desk was organized, important documents filed away. Her laptop, normally left open and charging, was nowhere to be seen. I checked the GPS tracking on her phone through our shared family plan. Instead of heading toward her usual spa in Lincoln Park, she was downtown in the financial district. At 3:30 p.m., I received a text. Running late. Dinner with Jessica afterward. See you tomorrow? I didn't respond. Friday morning, Lisa woke up early, spent extra time on her makeup and hair, and dressed in what I'd learned to recognize as her important meeting outfit. The kind of ensemble she wore when negotiating high-value sponsorship deals. Big day? I asked over coffee. Just some business stuff, boring meetings you wouldn't be interested in. After she left, I called Harrison. It's happening, I told him. You're sure? She's been meeting with someone downtown. Changed her behavior completely. This morning, she dressed like she was going to court. Michael, everything is locked down. Whatever papers she serves you with, whatever demands her attorney makes, they can't touch the protected assets. Just remember, don't react, don't get emotional, don't reveal that you know what's coming. Understood. At 11:47 a.m., a process server arrived at my construction site office. I was reviewing blueprints for a shopping center renovation when my assistant knocked on the trailer door. Mr. Davis, there's someone here to see you. Says it's about legal documents? I accepted the papers with the same professional courtesy I'd show any business correspondence. The process server seemed almost apologetic, probably not used to divorces being handled so calmly. After he left, I opened the envelope and read through the filing. Lisa was seeking dissolution of marriage, requesting spousal support, and claiming entitlement to 50% of all marital assets, including Davis Construction and related business entities. Her attorney had done competent work with the information available. The filing referenced the financial accounts Lisa had discovered, estimated the company's value based on public records and industry comparables, and painted a picture of significant marital wealth that should be equitably distributed. What the filing didn't reference was the legal structure that made all of those assets unreachable. I called Harrison from my truck. Got the papers. They're asking for half of approximately $8 million in assets. Which assets specifically? The business? The accounts she found? Estimated value of investment portfolios? Harrison laughed. Actually laughed. Michael, they're trying to divide assets that don't legally exist in your name. It's like filing a lawsuit to claim half of someone else's trust fund. How long before they figure it out? Depends on how good her attorney is. Could be weeks, could be months. But eventually they'll request full financial disclosure, And that's when they'll discover the real structure. And then? Then they'll realize they've filed for divorce against someone who, legally speaking, owns almost nothing. That evening, I arrived home to find Lisa in the kitchen, opening a bottle of champagne. "We need to talk," she said, her voice bright with nervous energy. "Okay." She handed me a glass and raised her own in a toast. "To new beginnings." I didn't drink. "Lisa, what's going on?" Her practiced smile faltered slightly. "I filed for divorce today." "I know. I got the papers at work." "You're not angry?" "Should I be?" She studied my face, clearly confused by my lack of emotional response. This wasn't the script she'd rehearsed. "Michael, I want you to know this isn't about not loving you. It's about both of us being honest about what we want from life." "And what do you want?" "I want independence. I want to explore who I am when I'm not just someone's wife. And I want financial security while I figure that out." "I see." "The prenup we signed? It was based on limited information. I've learned more about our actual financial situation, and I think we need to have a more honest conversation about asset division." "More honest than what?" Lisa's confidence was returning as she settled into what was clearly a prepared speech. "Michael, I know you've been hiding money from me. I'm not stupid. No one lives the way we've been living on the income you've shown me." "What income have I shown you?" "The tax returns, the business documents, the bank statements. They don't add up to what we spend." She pulled out her phone and opened a spreadsheet app. "I've been tracking our expenses for 6 months. Restaurant bills, travel, shopping, the cars, this apartment. We're spending almost $600,000 a year on lifestyle alone, and that's not including business expenses." I had to admire her thoroughness. She'd done her homework. "Lisa, I explained the business cash flow." "Stop." She held up her hand. "Michael, I hired an attorney. A good one. She's reviewed what I could find of our finances, and she says I'm entitled to half of everything, including assets you haven't disclosed." "What assets haven't I disclosed?" "That's what we're going to find out during discovery." She was pleased with herself, clearly believing she'd outmaneuvered me. "My attorney says most men hide assets during divorce proceedings, but judges don't like that. They tend to punish deception." "Your attorney is right about that. So I'm hoping we can settle this amicably. 50-50 split, reasonable spousal support while I rebuild my career, and we both walk away with dignity intact." I finished my champagne and set the glass down. "Lisa, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "In 3 years of marriage, have you ever been to my house?" Her face went blank. "What do you mean?" "This is your house. This is a rental. The lease is in Davis Construction's name, filed as a marketing expense. Have you ever been to the house I actually own?" The confusion in her eyes was genuine. "I don't understand." "The Lamborghini we drive. Do you know how much I pay for it monthly?" "You bought it, didn't you?" "It's a lease, $2,400 a month, also filed as a business expense." I could see her mental calculations shifting, her confidence beginning to crack. "Lisa, the lifestyle you've been documenting for your followers, the wealth you think you're entitled to half of, most of it was designed specifically for you. It's not my actual life." "That's impossible. The money has to come from somewhere." "It comes from Davis Construction's marketing budget. 3 years of maintaining the illusion that I'm wealthier than I actually am." She was staring at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "The real Michael Davis lives in a 3-bedroom house in Oak Park that's worth about $180,000. He drives a 2015 Ford pickup truck. He eats lunch from a cooler on construction sites and considers Olive Garden a special occasion restaurant." "You're lying." "Your attorney will figure it out during financial discovery. Every expense related to our lifestyle is documented as a business cost. The penthouse, the cars, the restaurants, the travel. It's all marketing spend designed to create a specific image." Lisa sat down heavily in one of the designer bar stools I'd leased along with the apartment furniture. But the business is worth millions, she said weakly. The business that's owned by a Nevada LLC, which is owned by a Delaware holding company, which is controlled by an offshore trust that was established before we met. Her face went completely white. Lisa, the man you married doesn't actually own Davis Construction. He's just an employee who works there. The next 3 weeks were educational for both of us. Lisa's attorney, Sandra Morrison, was competent and aggressive. Exactly the kind of counsel you'd want for a high-asset divorce case. She filed extensive discovery motions, demanded full financial disclosure, and prepared for what she clearly expected would be a complex battle over hidden assets. What she found instead was exactly what I'd told Lisa. Michael Davis, the individual, owned almost nothing of value. The apartment we lived in, leased by Davis Construction for client entertainment purposes. The luxury cars, also leased by the company, driven by an employee for business image purposes. The travel, dining, and shopping expenses that had funded Lisa's lifestyle content? All documented business costs with detailed justifications for each expenditure. Davis Construction itself? Legally owned by entities beyond Sandra Morrison's reach, structured through jurisdictions that didn't recognize Illinois divorce courts. I attended the depositions with my own attorney, David Park, a specialist in asset protection who'd worked with Harrison Blackwood on similar cases. David's approach was simple. Answer every question honestly and completely, provide every document requested, and let Lisa's legal team discover for themselves that there was nothing to hide because there was nothing accessible to take. "Mr. Davis," Sandra Morrison asked during one particularly lengthy session, "do you expect this court to believe that a man who's been living a millionaire lifestyle for 3 years actually owns assets worth less than $200,000? "I expect the court to review the documentation I've provided and draw its own conclusions," I replied. "Where's the money coming from?" "Davis Construction's marketing budget, as detailed in the financial records you've subpoenaed." "And who controls Davis Construction?" "That information is in the corporate filings I've provided." She spent 20 minutes walking through the ownership structure, trying to find a point where the legal entities connected back to me personally. There wasn't one. "Mr. Davis, this arrangement seems specifically designed to hide assets from your wife." "The arrangement was established 12 years before I met my wife," David Park interjected, "as documented in the trust instruments and corporate filings, all predating this marriage by over a decade." Sandra Morrison was good enough to recognize when she was fighting a losing battle. After 6 weeks of discovery, she requested a private conference with David Park. "Your client created an elaborate fiction to deceive my client about his true financial situation," she argued. "He induced her into marriage under false pretenses." "His client legally owns exactly what he's disclosed," David replied. "If Ms. Davis made assumptions about his wealth based on lifestyle spending, those assumptions weren't based on factual representations he made. He was living a lie. He was an employee of a company that provided him with certain lifestyle benefits as part of his compensation package. All documented, all legal, all reported to the IRS. I wasn't present for that conversation, but David filled me in afterward. Sandra Morrison was facing the professional embarrassment of having filed for half of assets that didn't exist while being outmaneuvered by legal structures she hadn't anticipated. Lisa was facing something worse, the complete collapse of the identity she'd built over 3 years of marriage. The final settlement conference took place on a gray December morning in Sandra Morrison's downtown office. Lisa sat across from me at a polished conference table, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. The confident influencer who documented our lifestyle for millions of followers had been replaced by someone who seemed genuinely lost. "My client is prepared to accept a no-asset divorce," Sandra Morrison announced, the legal equivalent of surrendering. "No spousal support, no asset division, clean break." "Agreed," David Park replied. Lisa spoke for the first time in an hour. "What about the apartment? The cars?" "Company assets," I explained gently. "They were never ours to begin with. So I get nothing? After 3 years of marriage, I just leave with nothing? You get your personal belongings, your business equipment, your social media accounts, everything that was actually yours before we married. She stared at the settlement documents without signing them. Michael, where will I live? It was a fair question. Lisa's income from influencer marketing was substantial, probably $200,000 annually in sponsored content and brand partnerships. But her lifestyle expenses had been covered by my marketing budget. She'd never needed to budget for rent, utilities, or basic living costs. You'll figure it out, I said. You're smart, you're talented, you've built a successful business. You just need to rebuild it based on reality instead of fiction. She signed the papers with hands that shook slightly. After the legal teams left, Lisa and I sat alone in the conference room for a few minutes. Can I ask you something? She said. Sure. Did you ever actually love me? I considered the question carefully. I loved the idea of you. I loved how beautiful you were, how talented you were at building your brand, how professionally you approached your work. But I don't think I ever loved the real you, because I'm not sure either of us knew who that was. And you planned this whole thing? The fake lifestyle? The hidden assets? Everything? Lisa, I built asset protection into my life long before you came along. The lifestyle was something I created specifically for our relationship because I suspected that the real me wouldn't be interesting enough for someone like you. Someone like me? Someone whose entire career is built around aspirational content. Someone who needs a certain level of visible wealth to maintain their brand image. She was quiet for a long time. You're right, she finally said. I probably wouldn't have been interested in a construction worker who lived in Oak Park and drove a pickup truck. I know. That's why I never introduced you to him. 6 months after our divorce was finalized, I drove my Ford F-150 to my actual house in Oak Park. The modest 3-bedroom Craftsman I'd owned for 15 years, but Lisa had never seen. I'd spent the months since our separation gradually moving my real possessions back from storage, reassembling the life I'd temporarily set aside to maintain an illusion. The house felt comfortable in a way the penthouse never had. Furniture I'd chosen for function rather than appearance, books I'd actually read, tools I'd actually used. This was where Michael Davis lived when he wasn't performing the role of Lisa's wealthy husband. I kept tabs on Lisa through her Instagram account, which had evolved significantly since our divorce. Her content had shifted from luxury lifestyle documentation to something more authentic. Honest posts about divorce recovery, rebuilding after setbacks, finding confidence without financial security. Her follower engagement had actually improved, suggesting that her audience preferred authenticity to aspiration. She'd moved to a nice apartment in Wicker Park, scaled back her lifestyle significantly, and seemed to be building a more sustainable version of her brand. I was genuinely happy for her. Davis Construction continued operating exactly as it had before Lisa entered my life. The complex ownership structure that had protected my assets during the divorce continued protecting them from potential lawsuits, creditors, and future relationship complications. Business was good, projects were on schedule, and my employees never learned that their boss had spent 3 years of his life pretending to be someone else. 1 year after the divorce, I received an unexpected phone call from Lisa. Michael, I hope it's okay that I'm calling. I got your number from your office. It's fine. How are you doing? Good, actually. Really good. I wanted to thank you. For what? For not destroying me during the divorce. You could have exposed everything publicly, ruined my brand, made it impossible for me to rebuild. You didn't. It wouldn't have served any purpose. I know, but most people wouldn't have been that careful about protecting someone who'd tried to take half their wealth. Lisa, you didn't try to take my wealth. You tried to take what you thought was my wealth based on information I'd deliberately given you. There's a difference. Is there? I still hired an attorney, filed papers, tried to force you into a settlement. Based on false information I'd provided. You acted rationally based on what you believed to be true. There was a long pause. Michael, can I ask you something else? Sure. Are you dating anyone? Not currently. You? No, I'm learning to be happy by myself first. My therapist says that's important. That sounds healthy. I keep wondering what would have happened if you'd just been honest from the beginning. If you'd shown me your real house, your real life, your real self. I thought about it. We probably would have lasted about 3 months. You would have gotten bored, I would have felt inadequate, and we both would have moved on without much drama. But maybe that would have been better than 3 years of elaborate fiction. Maybe. But then you wouldn't have built your brand to the level you have now. And I wouldn't have learned that I'm capable of maintaining a performance that complex for that long. She laughed. The first genuine laugh I'd heard from her since before the divorce proceedings began. So we both got something out of it. We both got exactly what we thought we wanted until we figured out what we actually needed. After we hung up, I sat in my real living room, in my real house, drinking a beer that had cost $12.50 sealums instead of $15, and reflected on the past 4 years. I'd built my asset protection system to defend against threats I'd never clearly defined. During my marriage to Lisa, those threats had materialized exactly as I'd feared, not from maliciousness, but from simple human nature. People want security, they want comfort, and they want to feel that their efforts are rewarded. Lisa had seen what she believed was wealth and had wanted her share of it. That wasn't evil or even unreasonable, but it would have destroyed the financial security I'd spent decades building. The system had worked perfectly, protecting assets that Lisa had never known existed while maintaining the illusion of a lifestyle she'd found compelling enough to marry into. But more importantly, the experience had taught me something about myself. I was capable of being someone else entirely when the situation required it. For 3 years, I'd successfully played the role of a wealthy entrepreneur, maintaining that performance so convincingly that even I sometimes forgot it was an act. That was a useful skill for someone who preferred privacy, authenticity, and the simple satisfaction of building things that lasted. 6 months later, I met Sarah Chen at a community gardening project in Oak Park. She was a 43-year-old high school physics teacher who'd moved to Chicago from Portland, bought a small house 3 blocks from mine, and was trying to establish roots in a new city. She drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic, wore clothes that prioritized function over fashion, and had never heard of Instagram influencers. When I told her I owned a construction company, she asked practical questions about building codes and project management rather than lifestyle details or revenue figures. On our third date, I took her to Olive Garden. She seemed genuinely pleased. "This is nice," she said, looking around the restaurant with the kind of appreciation most people reserved for Michelin-starred establishments. "I love places where you can actually have a conversation without feeling like you need to whisper." I realized I'd found someone who preferred the real Michael Davis to any performance version I might create. We've been together for 8 months now. Sarah has been to my house dozens of times, has met my employees, knows exactly how much money I make and where it comes from. She's seen the Ford F-150, the modest furniture, the simple life I'd temporarily abandoned to maintain an illusion. She seems to prefer the reality to any fiction I might construct. Sometimes the strongest foundation is the one that doesn't need to be hidden. Subscribe if you agree.